So let's see if we can graph this. F of x equals 2x over x plus 1. And when I graph this, I want it to kind of maybe look like my standard. I would like to get it to look something like 1 over x, so that way I could shift that graph. So I'm going to go ahead and do long division with this. I'm going to go ahead and do my 2x and my x plus 1. Do long division. What times x gives me 2x? 2. 2 times x would be 2x. 2 times positive 2 is plus 2. Subtract both parts. I'll get a negative 2 because there's a 0 here. 0 minus 2 should be negative 2. So I get 2 plus negative 2 over x plus 1. Okay, so I'm going to write this in a form that we see more. So I'm going to have the x first. So negative 2 over x plus 1 plus 2. And I'm going to try to see how this would transform my regular graph. So my 1 over x graph, as we said before, has asymptotes on the axis and follows the asymptote to the top right and follows the asymptotes to the bottom left. So what does this graph do? Well, it has a negative in front of it, so the negative in front of it would flip over the x. Let's see, it would also shift to the left 1 because that's inside of it, and it would shift up 2. Okay, so I'm going to shift my asymptotes. I feel if I can shift my asymptotes, I might be able to draw this. So let's see. My asymptotes were shifted left 1, up 2. So instead of my asymptotes going through my axes, I'm going to have them go through this point, my left 1 and up 2. Cool. So there's my asymptotes. In a normal one, it would be in the top left, right? But it's also going to flip over the x-axis. So this is going to flip over the x-axis. When it flips over the x-axis, it's going to be in the bottom right. Bottom left, sorry, bottom left. And when this flips over the x-axis, it is going to be in the top left. Man, I cannot get my left and right today. So this will be in the bottom right. It's usually in the top right. This is usually in the top left. But if I flip over the x-axis, this will be in the bottom right. This would be in the top left. Okay, so that wasn't horrible. We were able to just do long division and figure out where my asymptotes were. But I could have also found my first asymptote, my shifting left one, just from looking at this. As we said before, my vertical asymptote is related to my domain. So the only thing I can't have in my domain here is negative 1. So therefore, my vertical asymptote is actually going to be at negative 1. So domain x can't equal negative 1, vertical asymptote x is going to equal negative 1. For my horizontal asymptote, I did long division, right? My horizontal asymptote ended up being how many times it actually went into it evenly. So my horizontal asymptote is really just how many times my first term here, my highest term, is going to go into my highest term in the top evenly. So it's kind of just the ratio of 2 over 1. It's just looking at that and saying if I divided my first terms, what would I get? If I divide my first terms, I would just get left with 2. We can use that. Whenever these are the exact same power, it's always just going to be the ratio of those two things. So we'll do that in a minute.